Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Outside the Camp podcast. My name is Destiny Schaefer and I am your host, and today I'm introducing a special person for a lot of reasons. There's been a lot of change that's happened in the few months that have gone past since our last episode. A lot of changes, a lot of shifts that we're going to talk about today. But I would also like to introduce you guys to your new co-host, Mr. Will Smith. Hi, babe.
Hi, how are y'all doing today?
You sound like you're reluctant, like you didn't agree to do this.
No, it's first of all, it's an honor to be here. Let's just thank the Lord for just allowing this moment to sink in and just to be present in this moment. I'm glad to be here. I'm Will Smith, as she said. We're just here to catch y'all up on a lot of things. Talk about stories and what life looks like right now. And so
a lot of transitions and things. I think that when I first was I've been praying for a guy to come alongside me and be passionate about the things that I was passionate about for years and years and years. If you guys were along for the journey back when Kipos was the thing, we've been praying for that since Kipos. And in a really tumultuous season, you showed up in my life, and not only are you passionate about the Lord and discipleship and a lot of things that I'm passionate about, you've also felt like the Lord call you to step into a role within Outside the Camp, which has been really exciting and really cool to see. But you've also stepped into a role in my life as my man. Okay. Anyways, so to get started, before introducing you into just all the things and jumping into all the conversations, because we talked about a lot of things we want to talk about, as far as discipleship goes and forgiveness and culture and living this life and sharing not only our personal lives but our relationship with people and with the world and what it looks like to be obedient to the Lord in that. I also want you to share your story of where the heck you came from. Who are you? What's your story? How did you meet the Lord? So the floor is all yours. Take it away.
All right. So again, I'm Will Smith. I know that's the third time we said that.
Yeah, the one and only.
The one and only, as she said, right? So honestly, I don't even know where to start, but I do know that just in past seasons of life, it's been very interesting. How I met the Lord. Well, first, I was growing up in church. I was back and forth between my grandmother and my mom.
Where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Houston, Texas. Yeah, I'm from Houston. So, growing up between living with my mom and my grandmother, if it wasn't due to school behavior, it was just more because I wanted to be more with my grandmother. And so I was just back and forth with that, but I was always in the church, especially with my grandmother. She always made sure I went to church growing up as a little kid. And so, so I think it was just one of those things where when I was in church as a routine. Yeah, so I was just growing up in the church with my grandmother. Between my mom and my grandmother, I was always finding myself in the church, more so of a routine than anything. I really didn't know who the Lord was, right?
Yeah.
And then so I'm the oldest of three. My mom has two boys, one girl. I'm the oldest. So she's basically growing up as a single mother majority of her life. She got married once to my sister's dad back in 1999, 2000 maybe, because my sister was born in year 2000. So we stayed in a small city of Port Arthur. It's a small city named Port Arthur, and so we were married. She got married and we moved down there. And that was interesting because that was a change. I think that was one of the first changes of anything. Just moving to that city and just starting over, her new life with her marriage and everything. And unfortunately, that came to an end. Yeah. And so we moved back to Houston. I think this was around when I was in elementary. So y'all forgive me, I don't remember the ages, but what I do know is that we were poor growing up, right? Poverty hit us. And I think that's something that runs in our family too. It's just with the poverty. And so I remember times when I went to school, elementary school, with one sock on. It was challenging, and it's not to say that my mom didn't do all she could, because my mom did a wonderful job. Yeah, wonderful job as a single parent, and even in a failed marriage, at that time she still was able to provide, do whatever she needed to do. And then shout out also to my sister's dad, because he played a significant role of raising me as well in that time. So I want to give a shout out to that. And then even with my grandmother and my dad, they helped raise me too. And there's some things that, like I said, like my dad, my biological dad, it was a lot of things that wasn't. It was a lot of things that I seen that I wasn't too fond of. I was like more so disappointed if it was drugs, or if it was going to jail and prison and things like that. But I also have to find myself, like, to this day now, to know, like, he did all he could as well. Yeah. I try not to hold that grudge against parents, because as parents we try to do what we can, and I do have a son that's 6 years old, so I want to let that be known too. So as a father, we realize that we do all we can, right? And so growing up, middle school, that's when I really started getting a little hectic, like as far as
he was a menace.
Yeah, I was a menace, as she said. But growing up in that, when I was with my grandmother at the time, so like just growing up in middle school at my grandmother's house, I was getting everything I want. My dad, he used to give me everything I want too, my biological dad, and so, that was great, right? But I don't think that helped when it came to my behavior. But however, so like I said, my dad, he did all he could. I'm not just going to pinpoint the bad things. I'm also going to acknowledge the good things as well. And I think we need to do a better job at that, just as people, like for the people that may have disappointed us, or like have wronged us, or if anything, any relationship that we feel like needs reconciliation, we have to like acknowledge the good things of that person too. That's why it's called honor, like how it says, honor the mother and your father, right? Mm-hmm. And so from middle school going on to high school, I moved back with my mom. And my 9th and 10th grade year, I went to a high school, Madison High School. Met some great people that year. And that year also was a little hectic too, because I was to a point where in high school it was more of a fashion thing, right? So we really didn't. I got what I needed, but it was some things that I wanted too, right? And so the things that I wanted, I tried to get it on my own, right? And so how do I do that? I would go to stores and I would like steal them out of the stores, right? And not only until that day, I believe it was April of 2012. Mm-hmm. No, I'm sorry, not 2012, 2009, I believe. I got caught at a JCPenney's taking socks and you name it, all kind of stuff, little small minute things, right? Yeah, crazy. And so that was my 10th grade year. So I would probably say I was maybe 16, 15, 16, I don't know, between that. And luckily I got arrested, but however they didn't charge me because I was an adult. I was only 16. I wasn't 17. So the Lord showed his face. He showed his presence in that moment for sure. He gave me a second chance at that. And so from there my mom was like, you know what, you got to go. So she sent me to my grandmother's house. So my grandmother, I went to her house for my junior year in high school, and that was a high school called North Forest High School. So that was an interesting year too, because I met some people, but I just knew I wasn't gonna be there long. So I embraced that season in that time of my junior year, and then come my senior year, I moved back with my mom. So I was back and forth. Yeah, I told you I was back and forth, right? And so a lot of change, right? It's a lot of change going on, and so different schools I went to, but I met great people. And to this day, I still keep in contact and close to some of these people from Madison High School and then Stratford High School. So once I graduated from Stratford High School, I went to HCC for my first 2 years out of high school. Was aiming for my associates in criminal justice. So I didn't finish because I wanted to go full-time, working a full-time job, because I needed money. And so I went after that. And doing that, I got a full-time job at working for corrections. It's a jail facility. Worked at a few of them, but the first one that I went to, that was back in 2015. in that, I met my son's mom. Her name was Ariana, which was my first wife at the time. Met her that year in 2015, and we was in a relationship for about a year, and then after a year we ended up getting married, and then following that year she had a son at 2 years old, so I met both of them when she had her 2-year-old son. So became a family, became one. So getting married, at an age of like, well, we got married that year, that second year when we were together. So getting married at 23, 22, 23. Young guy, right? Not don't know what he doing, just wanted a family, wanted love, and so I found it, and then we ended up having my son Kyrie, who is 6 now. Had him in 2018 of June. So years go by, things, as we're growing together. She was always 2 years. She was 2 years older than me, so I was 22. She was 24, and so as we're growing into this thing, young, don't really know what we're doing, but we, learning as we go. Yeah. But one thing I can say, she never forgot. As she was growing in a marriage, she was always good at being a mother, right? She was always good at that, and so in that, I had to learn some things because as a parent, I'm young. I didn't have a child. Of course, she had a son when I came in the picture, but however, I don't think that it was something that, I was good at. So I had to learn that. And so in that, growing up, had Kyrie, so now we have 2 boys, right? I'm learning as a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, learning how to raise 2 boys and be a man of the house and be a husband. So all those things, waiting on a 23, 24-year-old, and I'm just like, it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So in that, years go by. I guess with just me being young, like didn't see it from both sides. I would only see life within one lens, and in that lens, that would be me being selfish, me being, just wanting everything that I wanted, right? Even committing acts of adultery in the marriage, like stepping out on the marriage, and so like it was a lot of things that I would say that could have been done differently. Yeah. And so like I just just find that to be something to this day I kind of reflect back on, and like how some things that I wish I could have changed then, right? But of course I can't change them now. Right. But the Lord was still at work even in that. And so all those years go by. So back in 2021 of July, she was in September of 2021, she was diagnosed with cancer, liver cancer. And so through those moments, I would find myself, empathizing with her, knowing that, like she's carrying this illness, and she was only 28 at the time, so I'm 26. And so like carrying the illness at that age, it's pretty devastating. We don't really know what to do. So we just go through the motions. We try to do everything we can, whatever the doctors tell us to do. Going through chemo, making sure I would take off of work. As she was off of work, she had to take off work for me just to make sure she gets the chemo back and forth. And so that was the first round of chemo, which, the cancer went away the first time. But then it came back, I would say maybe in February of 20... I'm sorry. So it came in July of 2021, and then, no, it came in September of 2020. I'm sorry, 2020. And then in 2021, it came back in February, around February, March, something like that. And then it came back a little heavier the second time. Yeah. And so one thing she would always say is, I'm going to come out of this thing, and, so we're going to take some trips because we're not going to let life stop. We're not going to let, sickness stop our life, right? So we would go on trips. I went to Vegas in my birthday year in February of 2021, and then we backdoor and went to Atlanta because that's where she wanted to go in March in 2021. And so, like, in that, we were trying to just embrace those moments. And so in June of 2021, we ended up taking the kids to Disney, and unfortunately that was our last trip because while we were out there, she ended up, sleeping a lot, and so I had to call the ambulance to kind of, help her to wake up because she just wasn't responding in certain, in those moments when we were out in Disney. So, but luckily, by the grace of God, we made it back home. I was able to get on the plane, got her dressed, got her on a wheelchair, got her to the airport, got the kids ready as well. And I was anticipating on getting us back home. I didn't want to be stuck in Orlando. Like I wanted to get back home closer to family because I knew that was the more comforting thing at that time. And so, so in that same week we came back from Disney. Family came by, in the house to kind of check on her, to kind of come by and see how everything was going, and because they knew it was getting worse, right? And so that week, it was pretty hectic too, because in that, dealing with family, a lot of emotions involved, dealing with her sister, because it was a lot of disagreements, there was a lot of weight carrying for me because I have to deal with family and them disagreeing with certain things when it comes to being taking care of her and what's best for her, even, all those things. So, but yeah, so in that, I just had to find like comfort in that. And I think the only comfort I could was just try to be the best person I can be, to be the best man I could be for her at that moment and for the kids, right? And so in that, just trying to find that peace in that. And so so following that, after the family came over, that following weekend of July of 2021, on the 24th, she passed away that morning at like 2:00 that morning. She went to sleep and she never woke up again. And I think from that day, it was a lot of I didn't know what to feel, I think, at that moment. It was a lot of grief, a lot of, I won't even say anger. I want to just say grief right now. A lot of confusion, not knowing of everything happened, because it was one of those things where it's like, what's going on, but you just don't want to accept it. It's one of those things where you have all this going on, but it's like, it just didn't click yet, right? And so in that, trying to find my way through all of that, navigate through all that. My mom was there to help me out. My best friend was there to help me out. Family was just being supportive. Her family was, they were doing all they could as far as, just trying to navigate through it all as well.
Yeah.
And so, so buried her August 9th of 2021. And then after that, a year or two go by trying to navigate through that. The oldest ended up leaving and going with her sister. I think the family thought it was best for him to be with them, so I had to accept that. And then so year of 2022, I think that's when the Lord really just came in and transformed me, transformed my heart. I would find myself binge watching YouTube sermons and all those things, different preachers, and find myself being, and in that too, that 2021 year, I ran into a guy, Trevor. He, helped me out through that time of that transformation year. I met him and he introduced me to some individuals that go to the church that they go to. And so in that church, I got connected with community, and I got connected with people, which helped me on my spiritual journey. So I think, just him and just those individuals in that time of just growing that year of 2022. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think the Lord really just he pruned me and worked on me in a lot of ways that I never thought that I would find myself, unlearning, because a lot of times we have to unlearn things just as well as learn things, and the unlearning can be heavy. The unlearning can be weighty, right? And so in all of that, I think the beauty, but painful, but also beautiful, is that as the Lord pruning and taking away some things, He's also filling us up with the things of His heart, the things of His nature. And so, and that from here to today, I stand before you, a man of the Lord, and that's it.
I love it. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
I love hearing it. Every time I hear it, I'm like, my heart, I don't know. I think my heart, grows for you a little bit more every time I think of, the things that you've been through and the suffering that you had to walk through before even, fully knowing the Lord, and how painful it must have been to to know of the Lord but not fully know him in a season where you needed him so much. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also too, I forgot to mention too, like even in that year of 2022, when the Lord was pruning me, I actually wrote a book about everything that I went through, the whole testimony, you know.
Yeah.
So
shameless plug, you wanna?
Yeah, so it's called Unfold. I wanted to make sure that the focus wasn't on the book, but it is a pivotal topic because that was something that the Lord put on my heart to write, and so that year was transformational, and with it being transformational, I was able to create a book on my life stories and what the Lord has done through all of the things that I've shared with y'all. So check that out on Amazon as well.
Yeah. Period. Link in bio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Link in the bio and Instagram. So.
Yeah. So in the mix of that's your life story and how you got to this place that we're in today, I'm gonna share a little bit of mine. I feel like a lot of times I've felt and been told that my story is a lot, and because of that, like, I've been like, I think almost diminished to a place of not being able to share my story. But I'm gonna jump into I'm gonna kind of touch on all of the things and try to make it as quick as I can. So, the life of destiny. So I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana. I think. I know I was born in Indiana. We recently just discovered, I don't really know if it was Indianapolis, but I know it was somewhere in that region. And that was in 2001, in May of 2001. In December of 2001, at the time I lived with my biological dad and my biological mom and my biological brother. In December of 2001, my mom left my dad, and so my mom grew up in Oklahoma/Colorado, kind of a question mark, I'm not really sure. She went into the foster care system when she was 17 and a half, from what I remember. And she went into a family that became her foster parents, and those are the people that I knew as my grandparents growing up. In December of 2001, they drove from Houston, Texas to Indianapolis to pick us up in their van, and they drove us from Indianapolis down to Houston, and we lived with them for like a year. After that, my mom ended up getting her own place out here, and we lived in like the Dirty Cypress area. That's what I like to call it, like Willow Hood area if you're from Houston. You know what I mean? So we lived in a little duplex out there, and my biological dad ended up moving to Houston, Texas a few months after that, from what I know. And I went to an elementary school, and like life as I knew it was normal. Like from what I knew, life was just like every other kid's life. It just was what it was. I remember my last year at that elementary school, my dad had moved back, and I think that there was some sort of, I don't know if I know their divorce was finalized in 2003. I think they were like working out like a arrangement for visitations and stuff. And then that same year, my dad's best friend ended up being convicted of assaulting and like sexually assaulting some girls. And somehow my name got brought into the mix, and I don't remember anything happening. I remember going to court and testifying, and I remember going to therapy, but I don't remember the actual events. But because of that, my dad ended up losing custody of me. So the story is told that he was molesting me as a child. I don't totally remember it. I don't know if that was the truth, but that was what the story was. My dad ended up losing custody of us because of that. And so he would, it's not funny, but like looking back, it's kind of funny. He would like come into our elementary school, and I remember they would have these things called Schaefer Days, which is my last name. And I thought that like, in my mind at the time as a third grader, my mind was like, oh my gosh, like we're the favorite kids in the school. Like they just like love us. And so they would have Schaefer Days, and they would like call us down from our classrooms to the office, and they would like lock the door, and they would like throw a party for us. They had like all of our favorite snacks in the file cabinet, and like we would have like a party. And I just thought it was because we were really good kids. And then I grew up and realized that the school was on lockdown, and it was because my dad was breaking into the school. And so they were locking us in the room so he couldn't get us. But shout out to my school, because they did a really good job of handling that. I had no idea what was going on. He would also at times like chase us. We would get off the bus. He would follow the bus home, and then he would like chase us down the street in his car. There was a time that he like kidnapped my like best friend that lived across the street from me, because we had the same haircut. So he thought she was me from the back. So he like kidnapped her and drove her down the street. And a lot of like really crazy things started happening with that. I think we ended up getting a restraining order. I don't know if it was like we had a restraining order against him or my mom did, but he couldn't like cross the street. He was like limited to like the stop sign, which is like 500 feet from the house or whatever. And so just like a lot of chaos, a lot of turmoil. At that time, that's when my stepdad came into the picture. He came in, as far as I remember, he was always there. And I remember like my mom and my stepdad like having what I thought was a really good marriage. They had fights sometimes. They would just like kick us out of the house when they were fighting, and then we'd come back and it'd be fine. And then the year after all the craziness was happening, we moved across town to a different area of town. And it was my mom, my stepdad, my brother, and me. And when we moved to that house, we told my biological dad that we moved to California to be with my stepdad's family. And so the story was that we had moved to like Long Beach, California, and that was where we were living. And he, I believe, moved to California to be with us. We gave him a fake address, and he ended up being in California for like 3 years. And then he hired a private investigator and found out that we never left Houston. He got like really mad and like blew up our phones and was like really angry about it. But at that point he was like, if you guys really just don't want to see me, like it's fine. When I was in 4th grade, I think, or 3rd grade, we had like police visitation. And so we would go to like a church down the street, and like we would have these like supervised visits where they'd be like a police officers at the front and like counselors in the room. And there was like a bunch of kids and like their parents that they like had visitation. I don't know. So we did that for a little while. After that, though, I never really saw my dad. Didn't have a relationship with him or anything like that. My stepdad that year, when I was in 4th grade, had a brain injury. And I remember, so he used to smoke cigarettes. And I was in 4th grade, and I learned that cigarettes were terrible for you and that you would die and get cancer if you smoked cigarettes. So I told him that he had to stop smoking cigarettes. So he stopped smoking them, and he started doing like nicotine gum and stuff. And the weekend that he stopped smoking them, he got super sick, and I felt like it was my fault that he was sick. And so I was giving him medicine. I was like waking him up every 4 hours, giving him medicine. That Monday morning, I went to go give him like his dose of Dayquil or Tylenol or whatever. And I went to wake him up, and he wasn't like responding to me. And so I started like shaking him, and he wouldn't move. I tried to like get him up out of the bed, and when we pulled him up, he fell on the floor. Like his whole body was limp. And so we called the ambulance, and they came and they took my stepdad away. My mom went with them, and I got on the bus and went to school because I didn't know what else to do. And yeah, so then ended up finding out he had a spontaneous brain bleed. At the time, they don't know what caused it. I think if it had happened today, they probably would have known, just because like I think medicine has advanced so much. At the time, they were like, we don't know what happened, but he had a spontaneous brain bleed. So my stepdad ended up being in the hospital in a medically induced coma for about 2 months, I think. And then he went to rehab for another like 6 months. He didn't know my name. He didn't know who I was. He couldn't remember anything. We had to like show him pictures and all of that. When he came back home, I want to say like almost a year later, he was having seizures all the time. So I had to learn how to like take care of him when he had seizures, and like when he would fall on the floor, like how to like position him, and how to care for him, and how to like take care of him and stuff. And it was a really hard place for me because I felt like I was like grieving someone that wasn't actually dead, but I felt like he lost like all of his personality, all of his function, like everything that made my stepdad was gone. So it was this weird place where I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to be happy because he's still here, but like my dad is gone. And so it was really difficult. I think in that, my mom had been through just a lot in her life. And I think that was just kind of like her last straw. When we were really young, my mom would do punishments that were just like a little crazier than the average person. And I think it was just like, I think she genuinely did the best job she could have given the life that she had. But I think because her life and her parenting that she got was so chaotic, she didn't really know what it meant to be a parent or what it looked like to be a parent. And for that, I don't fault her. I mean, there is grace for that. I also think that we have choices in this life, and we can choose how we educate ourselves and things. But my mom would do things that I still like to this day. I'll have conversations with people and like find out the things that I experienced weren't normal, that I thought were like completely normal. And yeah. Anyways, when my dad had my stepdad had his injury, I think that sent my mom into like another level of depression. So she started like sleeping for days at a time, and I think emotionally it was just really, really difficult for everyone in the house. And from there, our lives got pretty difficult. I think my mom, again, not having a loving home growing up, and also battling so many things, and also struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts and all of that. She would say some pretty mean things and do some pretty mean things to us. At the time, my brother was also diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and so he was trying to figure out all of that. He and I didn't have the best relationship. So there's like a lot of chaos happening at my house pretty much at all times. When I was 14, I was on a family vacation with one of my best friends. Shout out Lexi. You just met Lexi last weekend. Love her. She's having my first nephew soon, and I'm so excited. But we were on a family vacation, and we were coming home, and my mom was supposed to be picking us up halfway between where we were coming from and where, like, in Houston. And she had called me, and she was like, hey, like, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to be able to pick you guys up. I just got into a really bad car accident. I'm on my way to the hospital. They think I broke my neck, and I don't know what's going to happen. And I remember getting off that phone call. I remember feeling really upset just about the situation, and so I called the Jesus freak at our school, the girl that always talked about Jesus and never shut up about him. And I was like, hey, I need prayer. My mom just got into a really bad car accident. And she was like, oh my gosh, yes, like, I'll totally be praying. I'm actually going to church tonight. Like, I can come pick you up. And I was like, no, like, don't do that. Like, it's fine. Like, I just needed prayer. And she just kind of ignored me. Whatever. I went on with my day. She ends up showing at my house. She showed up and she was like, hey, we're going to church. And I was like, oh, like, I can't go. Like, I have plans. Like, I'm not, like, ready for church. And she was like, you're dressed and, like, you're ready to go. Like, we're leaving right now. And I was like, no, like, it's fine. Like, don't worry about it. And she gave me no option and forced me to get in the car and go to church. And we drove 30 minutes across the city. And I remember thinking, like, what church does this girl go to that's 30 minutes across the city? Like, why am I driving to the middle of nowhere? Well, I was driving into the city, but I was like, why are we driving so far just to go to church? Like, there's so many churches on the street. But it was a Saturday night, and I ended up giving my life to Jesus that night. And I had already been, like, going to, like, youth services and stuff, but, like, it wasn't ever real for me until that moment. I remember there was a big sign out front that said, welcome home. And I remember feeling like, for the first time, home wasn't, like, a negative connotation for me. Basically, from that day, I gave my life to Jesus. I got baptized a couple months after that, and I, like, dedicated my whole life to church, Jesus, ministry, all the things. At that time, I was 14, and that girl ended up becoming my best friend, and she is the best person I've ever met in my entire life, and I love her so much. But from there, I started serving every weekend. The church that I was at the time had 6 services on a weekend, so we were there, like, the entire weekend. As that church continued to grow, I met a lot of really, really, really cool people. I met a lot of people. And it was a really cool space to be in. It grew very rapidly. It was one of the fastest growing churches in America at the time. And I experienced a lot of things. A lot of my foundation for, like, my faith and my relationship with the Lord came from being at that place. And everything was great from the years of, like, 15 to 17. I'm not going to say great. Everything with the church was great. My life inside my home got significantly worse. Spiritual warfare went off like crazy. I was battling some really hard things with my mom. There were times that I, like, wasn't allowed to pray in the house, and there were times that she would mock me and was laughing at me, and every time I'd walk in the house, she'd be like, oh, the Bible thumper is home. And yeah, and it was...
Bible thumper is crazy.
Yeah, she used to call me that all the time. And I didn't know what it meant when she first said it, so I Googled it, and I was like, oh, that's not nice. I thought it was a compliment when she first said it, and then I was like, oh, that's not nice. That's not friendly.
Can you tell the people what that means?
Y'all can look it up. Yeah, and then we'd have, like, arguments about, like, theology and things, and my life got really, really difficult. I started talking to my youth leaders about how difficult my life was and, like, the things that were happening at my home. I started spending the night at a lot of my friends' houses because I was 15, so I didn't have a car. So to get to church, I would convince someone that lived in, like, my area of town to come to church with me on a Saturday night, and I would convince them to drive me. Once they drove me there, I would stay the night with somebody that was serving my team Saturday night, ride with them to church Sunday morning, and then I would convince one of my other friends on Sunday afternoon to take me home after church. That was, like, my routine every weekend for, like, a year and a half, or maybe 2 years, from 14 to 16. So I was, like, extremely dedicated to being there. And church became, like, it became my home. It became my safe place. It became the place that all of my other problems could drown out. It was the place that I ran to when everything else was crazy. As I was talking to my youth leaders about the things that were happening to me, I didn't realize that my home was, like, not normal until I started, like, spending the night at my friends' houses. And I was like, wow, like, these people are so nice to each other. Like, this is so weird. And I was like, I wonder if they're just like this when everybody else is around, or, like, if they're always like this. And then the more that I spent time with these people and I started, like, becoming kind of a part of their families, I was like, oh no, like, they, like, genuinely, like, this is just how they are. And at first I thought it was one family, and I thought they were just like weird. And then I did it with another family, and I thought they were weird. And then I started staying at my pastor's house, and I was like, oh, just because he's a pastor. And then it just became more and more obvious that like my family was the one that stuck out. So my youth leaders, as I started calling CPS often. CPS came out a few times to investigate. But if you know anything about the child care services, especially here in Texas, if your life is not like critically on the line, like they're not really doing anything about it. There was one week where CPS was called a little too frequently, and CPS came out and they were like, hey, we need you to leave your house for 2 weeks and stay with somebody else. And so I had called one of those families that I had been staying with all the time, and they were driving on their way to come pick me up so I could stay with them. And my mom was like, no, you can't go with them. And since she had like legal rights to me, she got to choose where I went. And she was like, ask our next door neighbors, who at the time, my next door neighbor was my boss, because I was like working for her on the weekends and stuff. And so I went next door with my little backpack, and we knocked on the door with me and my social worker, and we were like, hey, and she was like, hey, can she stay here for 2 weeks? And my neighbors were like, yeah, like we'll make up a bed for her, like no worries. And I was like, okay, cool. We walked in. I was really upset. The first couple of days I was mad because I wanted to be with my friends. That was like the first thing, because it was just like, it was also a hard time for me, like emotionally, like I wanted to be around my friends. So it's really difficult. I was really mad that I was there. 2, I was like, I know these people, but I don't want to live in their house. Like this is weird. Like it was like, I think at the time they had a 4-year-old son, a 1-year-old son, and then the mom and the dad of the house. And I remember like day 3 or 4, the mom would make like, she was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and so she would like home cook meals like all day long. It's like all she did outside of running her business. She did that too. But she like was making breakfast and bringing it to me, and making lunch and bringing it to me, and making dinner and bringing it to me. And I was like, these people are amazing. Like they cook meals all the time. Like I don't have to worry about anything. They take care of me. They wash my clothes. Like this is perfect. And so day 4, I think the mom of the house like did some like voodoo trick on me. I don't know what she did, but she sat me down in the living room, and she like convinced me to tell her my entire story and every horrible thing that had ever happened to me. And I did, and it was the first time that I'd ever shared with anybody everything. And to make a really long story short, of the next 3 years of my life, they would proceed to become my family, and I would spend 5 days out of the week with them and 2 days with my biological parents. And yeah, they became my family, and carrying on later down in my life, they end up becoming the only family that I have. So that's now who I refer to my mom and my dad as, and my brothers are now, 13 and 10. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 10 and 13, and they are my whole world, and I love them so much, and they're the best. So that was my adoption story. They didn't legally adopt me ever, but that plan is in the works, so there's that. Now carrying on from that, at the time, so then 17, when I was 17, I was still serving all the time at my church, and I was actively like pretty involved. I would serve in the churches like during the week. 2 to 3 days out of the week, I'd go to the offices and work there. On the weekends, I was there for every service. So I was spending like 30 hours at the church every week. There was a big transition happening at the church at the time. And to make a long story short, and also save the identities and reputations of some people involved, there were some friendships with some adults that just like got a little more carried away than they should have at the time, given that I was still a high school student and I was still a child. And when that ended up getting found out by the church, they basically asked me to step down and step away. And as I stepped away, they told me to like go to therapy and like go to a church where I would just be poured into and try not to serve and all of that, and come back like 6 months later and like reassess everything. And I was like, cool. Did that, came back a few months later. I came back earlier than they told me to, because I'm a really bad listener. But I came back after like 4 months, and I went to the campus that like my personal pastors were at, and I went and saw the lady of like the first lady of that family, and she was like, oh my gosh, like how are you? And I was like, I'm really good, how are you? I was like, life has been so crazy. And she was like, oh my gosh, I know, like how is church with your biological family? And I was like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, yeah, like they told me that you left because the Lord had called you to teach and like disciple your biological family. And I remember being so hurt and just confused. And I was like, for them to have told my pastors, like she told me that they had told her not to reach out because it was just like too sensitive and too hard for me to make that decision because I love my church so much. But it was like they had taken my testimony and flipped it as a narrative to say that that's why I left instead of telling the truth about what happened to me. And I remember in that moment, it was like all of the puzzle pieces started like coming together of all these people that I had known throughout the years. Is that the rain? That's terrifying. Yeah. It doesn't sound that loud though. But maybe it's because it's on the... Oh, wow. Rain, rain, go away. All the puzzle pieces started coming together of all of the people who had left over the years that I had been at this church, that had been like called overnight to go serve somewhere else, that I had realized like how many times did someone that I know severely get hurt in this church, and it was just covered up, a cover story was made, and they were just left out in the dark. And I remember just being like very eye-opening, and it felt like the curtain was pulled back, and like all these things that I had seen and heard, because I was pretty close to the pastor and his family, all these things that I had seen and heard like now finally like made sense. And I saw like behind the veil of this beautiful church that everybody saw online, that everybody loved and adored. It just finally like I was like, oh my gosh, like how many days did I spend serving not knowing that I was hurting people? How many days did I spend like knowing the people that I loved had walked away, and I had no idea that they walked away and they needed a friend? And like that was the whole point of what like we were doing, is like discipling people and caring for people. Like how many times did someone need me and I was just aimlessly serving instead? And I remember being like really heartbreaking in that season. I had to like change my entire like life plan. I knew that I was called to ministry. I was called to ministry when I was like 15, and I thought that meant working for the church. And so my goal was to like stay working there and then go on staff after I graduated high school full time, and like that was just gonna be my life. And so I wasn't planning on going to school. Plot twist, I had to change some things around, ended up going to school. Went to University of Houston, go Cougs. Big fan. I'm forever their most loyal dropout. But as I was going to University of Houston, I got plugged into another community of people that I initially didn't want to be a part of, because I thought they were like fake Christians. Like when I looked at all of them, I was like, they're lukewarm, like they're half in, half out. But I knew the guy that was running it, who's been on the podcast, Caleb Potter. Love him. And I've kind of told the story of how he convinced me to join that organization. So essentially I got into this community, got really invested, ended up serving, and about a year later, I ended up being sexually assaulted by one of my closest friends within that organization. In a way, I was very blindsided into the situation, very manipulated into the place that it happened at. And it was really heartbreaking, because I had finally gotten to a place where I trusted community again after walking through what I walked through. I was excited about community. I felt fully known by these people. And I was extremely transparent with them about just my life and the things that I had been through. I ended up having to file a police report, which turned into like a restraining order. And our community kind of like divided in half after that. And I have an episode where we talk about like forgiveness and what that looked like in this season. And the Lord was like, forgive him, fight for him to have community, which was really difficult. And yeah, so went through, I would say like 2 years of bouncing back from that and really being angry at the Lord and not understanding, like I had fought so hard to protect my purity and to give my life to the Lord, and to not be protected back like in return felt really heartbreaking. It was just really difficult. I ended up in the midst of that getting into a situationship, I don't really know, that lasted about 4 years. That was not the healthiest relationship in the world, and anyone that was around can attest to that. And it was really difficult. It was one of those things that was really difficult to leave, but really difficult to stay in. I think I lost a big part of who I was through that. And yeah, ended up being with him for 3 years off and on. And then decided to end that relationship in July of 2022. And then I moved to Dallas a month later. Moved to Dallas and started working in marketing. About 3 months after that, I ended up getting promoted at that marketing firm. And then I was asked to move to Vegas and open my own marketing firm. So I did that. Lived in Vegas for about a year. Experienced a lot of really hard things. Saw the business side of life. Saw what life was like without doing ministry. To make a long story short, the Lord brought me back here. And now I'm back in Houston, back in full-time ministry. And the Lord reignited my heart for people that have been hurt by people that have been believers, or communities that just didn't handle things properly, and thus began outside the camp. and here we are. Now our story, because those were both very long. You want to jump in? I feel like I've been talking for forever.
So our story. So at the church that I'm, the church that helped me with my spiritual journey, I joined that church, and throughout joining that church, I met some people, some great people, and then and then at some point, I was looking for more, right? And then great community there too, by the way, right? And so in that, I was trying to find like a community, like I was trying to dig deeper. I felt like the Lord was calling me deeper, and so in that, I had a friend that was going to another church, and the church that you were at as well.
Yeah. I can jump in there.
I felt like you should have started this off, because this was...
No, that's a good background to how you got there. So when I first moved back to Houston, mind you, I had not been a part of a church I hadn't been serving at a church since my initial situation happened before. I was going to church every weekend, but serving was a hard pass for me. When I first got back to Houston, the Lord was putting this desire to start outside the camp back on my heart, and being passionate for those that are hurt by the church. And the Lord told me that I couldn't be doing what I'm doing and fighting for those that have been hurt by the church without being a part of the local church. And so I remember looking for different churches in Houston, and there was this church that was launching that weekend, and I was like, I'm gonna go just try it out. If I hate it, I won't ever go back. Who really cares? I remember that morning praying, and I was like, Lord, what do you want my heart posture to be walking into this? And the Lord was like, you have such a forgiving heart, and you forgive people, even the people that have hurt you the most in this life. you've forgiven them for some really hard things, but you won't forgive the church. And I was like, but Lord, there's so many people that are involved in that, that's so complicated, there's so many different there's a lot of organizations involved, it's a lot of different people. And the Lord was like, to me, it's my bride, and if you can't forgive my bride, you can't be a part of it. Which is really hard to hear, but I think definitely what I needed to hear. I ended up going to that church that morning, and my pastor at the time, the pastor that was on stage, basically preached that exact thing. And then I had prayed that morning as well. I had asked the Lord for very specific things in the church. And he got on the stage, and he listed everything that I had mentioned that I wanted in a church, word for word, on the stage. So I was like, okay, Lord, I'm in. I ended up joining the team that day and started serving maybe 3 weeks later. And I got pretty rapidly involved in that community, and I think I almost got lost back in that serve culture that I was in at the previous church. And I think that there was a lot of times where I was like, I don't want to get back to that place. And so there were times that I was pretty loose with certain things. I was like, I'm not going to treat this like a job like I used to. So if I'm late, I'm late. If I can't come, I can't come. And it wasn't anywhere near as serving the church instead of the Lord as the first position was. But they ended up launching, since it was a church launch, they ended up launching these small groups right before summertime started. And I had gotten a call from one of the people that were on the staff months before they launched the small groups, asking if I would be interested in leading a small group. And I was like, absolutely, I would love to. And she told me the areas that they were looking for. And she was like, I thought personally that you would be really good for the young adults. Or singles, whatever you think. And I was like, I don't want to be single for a long time, so I don't want to lead a singles group. And so I was like, I love young adults. That's my heart. Let's jump in for that. And she was like, cool. So when the signups for groups came up, that was what I was going to do. And as we were having conversations about it, she and I were both like, well, I think that it'd be really good to have a male counterpart to be able to lead that with, to be able to bounce back and forth off of. And I had met a guy at a completely unrelated event recently. We had seen each other around in a lot of different spaces, but the first time that we met was just a few months before that, and we, I guess, became friends from that interaction with each other. And that guy was your friend that you came to that church with. And so when I was thinking of people to lead with, I knew his heart a little bit, and I just felt like the Lord put him on my heart. And so I went up to him at service one day, and I was like, hey, are you thinking about leading a group? And he was like, I was actually going to ask you the same thing. And he was like, I wanted to lead a group for young adults. And I was like, perfect, I'm leading a group for young adults. Let's do this thing. And thus became the young adults group.
And so after them starting all of that, right? So I was close to the mutual friend that you mentioned, and so he was always asking me, hey, you should come visit the church, and I was like, yeah, I'm just Yeah, I'll try to make my way there.
Yeah.
I just kind of like procrastinating with that. But so what I did was I started to I believe I started coming. I'm trying to see, did I start coming to the small group first? Or did I come to the church
No,
first?
you came to the church first.
Okay, so I came to visit the church first. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I came to visit the church, which was great. I enjoyed it. It was something that I was used to
Yeah.
previously before the church I was going to. So
Yeah.
so which was good. And so in the during that whole time I was I was like, all right, cool. So they as y'all were doing the leading the groups, I would come join the group. Well, I would come visit. I don't really want to necessarily say I joined because I was still
You
going.
were for sure in the group.
Well, I was in the
You
group.
were one of the most consistent people that were in the group.
Okay, I'm gonna let her say that, not me. But anyway, so in that I was coming, to the group because I was craving more for community. I was just craving more. I don't know what that more was, but I was craving it. So I would come.
Yeah.
So
you want to tell about how you asked about me before you met me, or do you want to?
All right, so I had before I joined the group, I don't know how I seen a post. I think I had seen our mutual friend post, the group when y'all were having the group or whatever, and I saw a picture or a video of you. I don't remember which one it was, but I was like, "Who's that? I'm interested. Who's that?
Put the mic closer.
Who's that? I'm interested." She wanted me to put the mic closer. Yeah. So anyway, and that wasn't the reason I was going to the groups, y'all. I just want to let y'all know it was for community, not
Yeah.
But we'll get to that though. I'm getting there.
Right.
It's getting closer. It's getting hot. So anyway.
Right.
So coming to the community, joining, coming to the groups. You guys had a 4th of July cook-off that I had attended.
We did.
And great 4th of July day. And that was, and then I met you. You showed up late. She showed up late. I just want to let you know.
Okay.
She showed up late to her own event.
Let's back up.
No.
Okay, I was late because since it was like a cookout, we asked everybody to bring stuff, and we were waiting to the last minute to see what wasn't there, what wasn't providing what we needed. So I had to pick up ice and stuff. That's why I was late. Anyways, and I was also like 10 minutes late. Let's not be dramatic. But I walked in, and mind you, like our first meeting was actually here, and there was like 12, 13 people maybe. Like it was really small. This was our second meetup, and there was like 50-something people coming. And so we walked in, and mind you, like the 12 people that were there we had already been having conversations, and we were invested. And so like I'm expecting them to be the people that are like serving and helping lead and stuff. Yeah. And I walk in, and I put the ice down, and I look up, and I see this man on the grill, and I'm like, I've never seen this man in my life. Who was this man on the grill? And it was this guy. And I was literally just telling my friends this morning how funny it was that like I noticed you, but I didn't like notice you, if you know what I mean. Which also I think that I was like leading 60 people. Like I was kind of hopping all around. But I did take a video of the entire group like first, and then I took a separate video of just you on the grill. So like maybe I did notice you a little bit. Anyways, the group. We start leading the group. We meet every week. Things were honestly going really good with the group. There was a lot of really cool things happening inside of it. A lot of like people were having things broken off of their lives and having really great conversations. Community was being formed. Now this is where I think things started going wrong. I think a couple things went wrong. First, I think that there needed to be more leadership over the group. It was really just me and this guy leading it. And because like we knew of each other, we didn't know each other super well. We were figuring out how to be friends while also figuring out who each other were, figuring out our leadership styles, trying to lead each other while also trying to get to know who each other was. I think that was like problem number one. And because I think a lot of like passive aggressive comments were made in places of misunderstanding. And then from there, we formed this little like friendship group inside of that group. And so we would have group on Thursday nights, and then a bunch of us would go hang out on Friday nights consistently. That's where I really got to spend a lot of time with you and get to know who you were. And that's kind of where my interest started like peaking a little bit. And then I could tell that he was like being a little flirty and saying a little flirtatious things. But I was like, I have questions because for so many reasons. One, I was like, I don't know you for real. You're very quiet, but you always look like you have so much to say, but you're not saying it. Two, you have a son. What's the story with the son? Like, what's happening? And I just like didn't know if I like was fully ready yet to be in a relationship. I had heard the Lord say at the beginning of that year that I was going to be meeting my husband this year. And so like I think that at the time like prior to meeting you, when the Lord said that, I just started looking everywhere and being like, is that my husband? Is that my husband? And like right when I met you, I had just like gotten to a stage where I was like, actually, Lord, like I don't even want to look for him. Like I'm not even looking. If he shows up, he shows up. If you come through on what you said, then cool. If you don't, you don't. And then you popped up. Jumping forward a little bit, we were all hanging out. There was one Friday night that we were hanging out, and you were at this little like wine bar pizza spot down the street, and they have like R&B game nights, and so you were doing that. And
wait, well, can I just mention too that it's funny and interesting that you said that you came to a point where you just stopped looking and you wasn't worried about that.
Yeah.
It's funny because that was the same for me. That when I was transitioning from one church going into the church you guys were attending, because I was at a point where I was like, I was looking too, you know, and so when I found the y'all community, I got to a place where I was like, you know what, I felt like the Lord was trying to tell me, let's focus on getting to know people and doing life with people. And once I shift my perspective of instead of trying to find a wife, let me find community. Yeah. Then that's when the Lord started showing me things or whatever. So I just find it funny you said that because it was the same for me.
Yeah. Through that friend group that was hanging out, I remember that night I had felt like our community, like our friend group, was getting kind of exclusive and a little cliquey, and I wanted to stop that from happening. So I invited a few extra people to come, just so that we weren't like excluding anybody or anything like that. And so we were all there and we were having a really fun time and things were all great. And I just knew at that point, I knew that you liked me, but I didn't know, like I didn't fully know. And so long story short, you showed up and you were extremely late.
And I was going to say that,
extremely late.
I was extremely late.
Talked about me being late to 4th of July.
It was a train.
You were like 2 hours late.
It was a train, a long train, and it stopped. Yeah, I've been to trains where they slow down, but for a train to just halt and just stop like that, crazy, insane.
Anyways, you showed up. And basically the story of how you asked me on a first date, because I'm going to do that first, and then we'll go into, because that's kind of like the beginning of us. We were playing Jenga, right? And if you guys know anything about Jenga, you know the basic physics of Jenga. If you pull the middle piece, you can't pull the outer pieces, right? If you pull the outer pieces, you can't pull the middle piece because it just won't stand, right? Basic physics. Okay, so this guy was trying to pull an outer piece where the middle was already gone. And I was like, hey, don't pull that piece because it's going to break. I'm trying to help you out. And you were like, no, I got it. And I was like, no, like, it's going to fall. Like, there's no way that's going to, like, physically it's not possible. And you were like, no, like, I'm going to get it. I'm going to show you. And I was like, no, you won't. And you were like, you want to bet? And I was like, I have full confidence. Like, I literally would bet $100,000 on this. Like, full confidence it's going to break. No? Okay. And so you said,
let's bet if I get this out, you allow me to take you out on a date. So. And
I said, yeah, because I knew I was going to get it. And so,
which in other words, she didn't want to go on a date with me.
That's not what I said. But I knew that it was still going to be like, it was like, oh, he made his move. That was smooth. Respect. But also I know it's going to fall. And then it fell.
But in my defense, it fell because we had friends on the left side of me that were hitting my leg for the table to wobble and for the things to fall.
Which is funny because they had no idea that he had said that. So they didn't know like that there was anything like betting on him making this. But also it fell because physically it wasn't possible.
See, the enemy was at work already.
It physically wasn't possible. It would have fell anyways. And then it fell.
Physics and science say that. But the Lord we serve,
please.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about that.
Anyways. And so it fell. And I was like, oh man, looks like you can't take me on a date. And I remember just like watching your face drop and you looked so sad. And I was like, oh, maybe that was too mean. Like, oops.
Oh, you know what? Well, since she says that, right now, it was a night prior before that game night. We had a Uno night. And, I'm not even, let's just say that she's really good at Uno. And she was just like embarrassing me to the point where it was like plus 14. Yeah. And then that same night I hit a plus 14 on her. So I just thought it was sweet or whatever.
Yeah. That was the moment that I knew I liked you, was when you hit me back with the plus 14. So I was like, oh, he's a little spicy. He got a little flavor in him. Like, period.
Oh, what you thought? I was just like this black preppy kid or something?
Whoa. No, you were quiet. You didn't say much. So I just thought that you were just, I don't know.
In my defense, I can be a preppy kid. So, it's... Yeah. It would make sense if you thought so.
Anyways, he missed the Jenga piece, okay? We end up going outside. we go outside, we're sitting at the picnic tables. To make an extremely complicated story very simple, I ended up getting into an argument with one of the girls, and we disagreed about some things, and it was getting very intense. And so I was like, hey, like, let's go to a separate table and have this conversation. And we went, and it was not a very encouraging conversation. I ended up crying, and I told her that I was praying in the middle of the conversation, trying to like have understanding of what she was trying to say. And she was like, well, I'm going to leave you to pray, and I'm going to go hang out with our friends, and let me know when you're ready to talk. And I wasn't ready to talk the rest of the night. And so I sat there on the bench away from everybody else crying for like 2.5 hours, which, if you know me at all, that's so unlike me. Like, terrible representation of who I am, terrible like first real impression after you asked me on a date that night. And just like, it was a very emotional night for me. And for me, I have felt like these were finally my people. I finally met community that cared for me and loved me. I felt like I was safe here, and I feel like I just got like that flipped around and slammed back on me. And I was really upset that like I was able to sit there for 2 hours crying. Everybody could see me crying, and not a single person came to check on me. It was really frustrating for me, because I was like, I've cared so deeply for these people that like if any of them even dropped a tear, I would come and give them the world to make sure they were okay. So I felt really like abandoned. I felt like very cast out. And it was really frustrating. And we ended up finally leaving, and you gave me the most awkward hug I've ever had in my entire life. And it was this hug of like, I don't know, I could just tell that you were like, I don't know what's going on with her, but it's too much, whatever it is. And so I ended up going in the parking lot, and one of our friends that night consoled me, and I cried for an extra like hour and a half, and like I like wept on the floor crying, like boo-hoo, like Kim K, ugly crying. And I remember one thing that really stuck out to me. She was like, okay, aside from everything else that we were talking about, she was like, aside from all of that, if you do not love this man and want to be with him, leave that man alone. And I was like, yeah, for sure. And she was like, no, like, Destiny, I'm so serious. Like, if you are not like 100% interested in this man and like want to spend the rest of your life with him, like, leave him alone. And I was like, why? Like, why do you care so much? I was like, that's super sweet, but like, why do you care so much? And she was like, she told me very, very, very briefly about your story, and she was like, his heart is very like pure and very intentional, and if you're not willing to care for it, like, leave him alone. And I think the fact that she esteemed you so highly made an impact on me. And I sent you a voice note at like
3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I tried to call you first.
3 o'clock in the morning. At 3 o'clock in the morning, y'all know them calls.
It's such a terrible night for me. But I just felt like I had to fix what I had just like shattered. And so I basically sent you a voice note. I was like, hey, like, I would love a chance to explain what just happened, and also like just explain what's going on and just talk to you about it. And also, if you still want to take me on a date, like, I know the Jenga thing fell, but you're more than welcome to, haha. And he responded back the next morning and said, hey, I would love to talk about some things before we proceed any further, something like that. And I was like, everything is shattered. Also, mind you, I sent him that voice note at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got home at 4 o'clock that morning, or 4:30, and I had to be at a music video shoot at 6 a.m. So I got an hour and a half of sleep and went to this music video shoot, filmed the music video shoot on like barely any sleep. On the way home, we had a conversation, and you basically asked me like my perspective on a lot of things, and I loved that you challenged me, that you listened to me, and that you were like seeking out things about me. Like, I could feel you like figuring out and like looking at how I handle conflict, and like you heard the things that I was talking about that had happened in this conversation with this girl. And I felt really seen and really heard by you in the way that you cared for that. And so we decided that we were going to potentially see what the future had, and just kind of like leave everybody else out of it and just keep it like me, you, and the Lord, and like forget all the drama that was going on. And I went home after that conversation. I took a nap, and I woke up to a text from my pastors that was like, hey, we would love to have a conversation with you. Can you talk at 5:30? Now, mind you, at the time, earlier that week, I was talking to one of the people on staff about like potentially stepping into more leadership and stuff, and so I thought it was going to be about that. I get on this call. It's the entire staff on the call, And I was like, hey guys, the whole gang is here. And my pastor was like, hey Destiny. And I was like, oh, this is serious. So I sat up, and they were like, hey, so as of right now, officially in this moment, you're officially off the dream team. And basically what happened was basically somebody that I had a disagreement had DM'd my pastor on Instagram and made some allegations about me. And due to those allegations, they weren't anything that I did. They weren't any like actionary things. It wasn't like I was living a sinful life or anything like that. It was allegations of things that were said that were very taken out of context, taken out of place. And because of that, they're moving from the dream team. It was a very hard conversation, especially given that I had trusted these people. It was the first time that I was trusting church again. And it was really complicated. That's to summarize that story on my end. Basically, the entire friend group ended up falling apart because of that. And there ended up being a lot of warfare and a lot of hatred. I felt like a lot of hatred thrown at me right after that. Stepping into us starting a relationship, then we end up going to this little like revival conference thing. Our mutual friend is not for us being together and says some pretty harsh things about me, which you in turn like very briefly shared with me. And I battled a lot of like, I don't understand how someone that I respect so much in the kingdom, like someone that I do value, and mind you, he and I had disagreements, but I still very much valued his place in the kingdom and valued his opinion. I didn't understand how someone that I respected so much, that I've seen so much of the Lord in, could say such hurtful and hateful things about me, especially given they weren't true. Like that was, I think, one of the harder parts. But it also just, I was like, Lord, like if these people hate me so much, is it me? Which is really hard for me to navigate through. And it was a really tough season. And yeah, in that, you came alongside of me, and I felt like that day this huge like burden and like heaviness fell on me, and like, you know, the story of like being equally yoked, right? And how it talks about like basically the concept of being yoked is like two ox are carrying like a wooden thing that sits on both of them. And I felt like I was carrying this like yoke, and this huge weight got dropped in the middle, and I felt like I like fell down. I ended up calling you after we had a conversation about it, and like it literally felt like you came alongside of me, and you were the other ox coming alongside, and you picked that burden up off of me. Not that you changed the circumstances, because the circumstances didn't change at all. Like my life was battling all those things, but you made the peace present. You made the comfort present. You made me feel like I was loved and seen and known and understood, and you walked with me as I like navigated through like, what could I have done better? Where were the areas that I messed up? What should I have done better? What can I do better the next time? And it literally felt like you came alongside of me and just like lifted that burden off of me, which is something that I had never experienced, especially in a relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she said it all. I mean, yeah, I think even just in that season, like you said, you mentioned like a lot of spiritual warfare that we were dealing with.
Yeah.
Me trying to navigate, what does this look like versus what is my friendship look like, my community at my church looks like versus the community you're dealing with at your church.
Yeah.
And so we're navigating all these pieces on the outside of us. And I remember telling you, I was like, you know, if we're going to seek what this may look like, we let it just be between us and the Lord, as you mentioned, and not really worry about anything that's going on your side, on the outside, and my stuff on the outside of me. And so, and
that was before it really even got crazy.
Right. And I feel like because if we allow the external circumstances, it would keep our eyes, it would shift our focus on what was in front of us instead of, you know, focusing on what the Lord had brought us, you know, brought us together and was trying to do through that. And so, and so in saying all that, the Lord can do beautiful things in chaotic moments and situations. Definitely. And I think we both can attest to that. And so, so yeah, I mean, like you said, this is a crazy experience, but I thank the Lord in that moment because I didn't allow other people's opinions to dictate or make decisions for me. Yeah. And now we're here today, you know, sharing those moments and grateful too. And like I said before, like no matter what an individual does or how they make us feel, we honor them. We are going to honor first before anything
100%.
else.
Yeah.
We're not here to, slander names. We're not here to talk about churches. We're not here for none of that. We are here to tell the power of our story.
Yeah.
And there is power in your story. And so, and so we want to be able to let everyone know that there's power in a person's story.
Yeah.
And so in that, it's a beautiful thing to see what the Lord has been doing lately.
Yeah.
We may be doing a part 2, y'all, because
it's possible.
Yeah, this may be a part 2 because we still haven't even got to the things that we're walking into. The Lord has.
Well, I think it'll be quick.
Yeah, it'll be quick.
But so I think that one of the most beautiful things that I love about our story is it's safe to say that both of us had like lives of suffering prior to meeting each other. Like we both have been through some really hard things and walked through some really hard things, and the Lord has met both of us in that and given us a sense of peace through those things, and also shown us where His hand was still on us in situations where it looked like He wasn't. And so I think it's a really beautiful thing that even in our story we met in a season of extreme chaos, and then ended up like the beginning of our relationship started in extreme suffering, which I think for me at least I would say like the calm in the storm being the closer that I was to you, the more that I wanted the Lord, the more that I sought the Lord, and the more peace that there was. Like as chaotic as life was, when I was talking to you about the Lord and spending time with the Lord, like that was my like peace. And I think that I had never been in a relationship ever before in my life where spending time with you made me want to spend more time with Jesus to be more like Him. And like talking to you about things like challenged me to be more excited about being transformed into who the Lord created me to be, not just for me, but also so that I could be better to you and love you better. And any other relationship I'd ever been in or anybody I'd ever talked to, like, distracted me from the Lord and pulled me away from time with the Lord. And I would get so caught up in, like, spending time with them and going on dates with them and getting excited about them that I would forget the Lord. And one thing that I love about our relationship is we always kept the Lord 100% at the center, whether that looked like valuing each other's time with the Lord. Like, if you were like, hey, I'm spending an extra time spending the time with the Lord, like, cool. If I was like, hey, I want to go spend a couple hours in the Lord, like, that was never like an issue, and it was like extremely encouraged. And then we also started like doing things with the Lord together, and then we ended up finding a new church and getting plugged in there and meeting our pastors and craving leadership, and there was a lot of similarity and a lot of confirmation happening around those spaces. And so it was a really beautiful season. But I think that because both of us had such lives of suffering, to suffer for the gospel was something that we both really understood and could relate to and understand about each other, which is why we wanted to talk about scripture. So, scripture. I was looking into like just some verses that I wanted to share with you guys that I think that I've held on to through my life and also through that season of us walking through a lot of suffering. Because I think we both suffered through that situation. We both suffered in very different ways. Like you suffered for the loss of this new church that you thought was going to be a new place for you, and you suffered through the loss of a close friendship. Now you guys are still friends, but it's not the same as it once was. And that caused a lot of suffering for you, and you felt separated from your community because of that, or isolated, or outside the camp, some would say. And I think for me, I felt like I had finally found community again. I'd finally been plugged in again. I was ripped away from that again in like a moment's notice overnight. I felt a lot of slander happening. I felt hatred. I felt wounded at the hands of people that I thought were the people that were going to comfort me and hold me. And I felt like I was being bashed by the very people that I thought were going to be the people that would propel me into the next season of life that I was stepping into ministry-wise. And so we were looking at 2 Corinthians 4. And I think that this like beautifully explains not only our lives, but also our relationship. So in 2 Corinthians 4, starting in verse 8, it says, "We're pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We're perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. Through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus, so the life of Jesus may be seen in our bodies. Yes, we live under constant danger of death because we serve Jesus, so the life of Jesus will be evident in our dying bodies. So we live in the face of death, but this has resulted in eternal life for you. But we continue to preach because we have the same kind of faith that the psalmist had when he said, 'I believe in God, so I spoke.' We know that God, who raised the Lord Jesus, will also raise us with Jesus and present us to himself together with you. All of this is for your benefit. And as God's grace reaches more and more people, there will be more great thanksgiving, and God will receive more and more glory. So that is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long, yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we see now, rather we fix our gaze on the things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. I think like this section of scripture defines your life, my life, and our life. And like what an honor to be able to see not only ourselves but our relationship so evidently in the scripture.
Is that James 2-4?
Yeah.
All right, so we have James chapter 1, verse 2-4. It says, "Consider all joy, my brothers and sisters, where you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let your endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing."
I remember when we first started like walking through everything, I was reading through James at the time. And I remember reading this, and it says, like, consider it all joy when you face many trials. And I remember the Lord saying, like, how much joy you must have. And I remember being like, okay. But I think it's also, like, it speaks on, like, through those trials, it produces endurance. And I think that's so true of relationships, too. Like, through the trials that we've walked through, like, that's why we have the endurance that we have for such a short amount of time of being together. Because people are always like, oh, my gosh, how long have you been together? Because it seems like we've been together for so long.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of why.
Yeah, I think too, and I heard you mention about like even with the time length of like when people ask how long you've been together. Mm-hmm. I think I think the tension that people hold nowadays, it's because culture tells you like, hey, like you got to be together this amount of time to really know a person, and I'm just like, yeah, but in the short period of time that we've known each other, it seems like the Lord was moving pretty quick on that, right?
He was.
Like the Lord's time is definitely not our time. And I think with just going back when James, verses 2-4, just the testing of your faith produces endurance. Like the various trials that we had to endure, like when we met each other. I just think that it's a beautiful thing because, of course not in the moment, right? We go through trials and it don't feel good, right? It's something that it tests us, right? Yeah. And so it brought us closer for sure.
Definitely.
Like it brought us a lot closer, and and I always tell you, like through all the things that we've been through, like no one's gonna be able to come between that. Like and of course in the beginning it felt that way, right? But I think in all of that, the Lord used all that because for one, it tested our faith, and then it also brought endurance. Yeah. Right. And I didn't think of like even just going through the whole trials or whatever when it came to me and you, I didn't really think that it would. I didn't know what was gonna come out of it, right? Yeah. Because at first I'm like, yeah, this is just too much. We're dealing with too much for a relationship. Usually in culture, when we say we're going through a lot, we like, nah, we're gonna walk away, right?
But the thing was though, like it wasn't anything happening between us.
It wasn't between us. It was things on the outside of us, right? And like. Yeah. And like people will walk away, and I think another thing with that is like culture also is like if it gets too tough, people usually walk away. But like I just felt like no, this was something different. It was something different with this, right? And I think for me, what is it that we walk away from things, and what if the Lord is trying to do something through that? Yeah. And we're always so quick to walk away. You walk away from a blessing that you don't even know that's in front of you, and so and that's something that we are experiencing today. Yeah, the blessing of that. So
I think like we also see like in scripture, because I kind of when we first started like talking, there was a lot of confirmation, but I also think that like I wanted to be sure and confident this is something the Lord like wanted me to walk into, and so the Lord kept repeating like you'll know him by his fruit. You'll know him by his fruit. And it was a scripture because I was reading through like all of the New Testament books after the Gospels at the time. And so I got to Galatians 6, and it says, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ." And I think that the way that we first met in that first conversation we had, you not only like listened to me and heard me, but you corrected me, and you helped me to see the ways that I could have done better and the things that I should have done that would have prevented some of these things from happening and would have probably prevented some hurt from happening. And I think the way that you did it, it was very gentle, it was humble. It wasn't like you're all-knowing and all the scriptures and anything like that, but it was like you were loving me so deeply that you cared to correct me. And especially believing that I was called to do something bigger than what I was doing. That gentle correction was so helpful. And then the next verse, like immediately saying like, share each other's burdens and in this way obey the law of Christ. And I saw like the fruit on your life looked like Jesus. Like the reason why it felt like you came in and like you lifted this like burden off of me and like you were like a sense of peace is because the Spirit of God was actively living inside of you. And like I truly wholeheartedly believe like the Lord sent you to be like a tangible evidence that he was with me and that he saw me. And yeah, so I think that was like the fruit that I was seeing on your life that I needed, and I valued that a lot. Yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful thing to hear. I mean, and I think you know this too. In the short, like in the times, the duration of time you've known me, is that I don't like the spotlight. I don't like to be in the front row, front center of anything.
But you can catch them on the front row of every church.
Right, at church, yeah, because the Lord is doing a new thing, right? But then also, too, is that it's funny that you say you'll know them by their fruit, is that I don't have to say much because you say it, right? And I think the Lord sometimes will use the people around you to show people the fruit that you're producing. Because a lot of times you see people thinking they're producing fruit because they're on the show, they're in the front rows of everything, they're trying to display that. But the real fruit is shown through other people. And so I believe that's a thing for me to kind of meditate on and to remind myself of that. It's not about performance. It's not about, the notoriety and all that. It's about doing the Lord's work, and it's about, the people really just showing up for you in, ways that you never thought the Lord would do. And so I just think it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah. I think it's also, we've talked about how our lives have both been like lives of suffering, and it's not just because like we're just like these super strong, like capable people. I think it's like the call of every believer is to suffer. And like there's that verse that says like, if you love me or if you want to follow me, you'll pick up your cross and like walk with me. And to pick up our cross is a really heavy weight. But I also think of the story of Simon of Cyrene as Jesus was like walking to the crucifixion, as he was walking to Calvary. The Roman guards sent Simon of Cyrene to come and carry the cross for him. And I think that there are times in our lives where the cross gets really heavy and we need a Simon of Cyrene to come and carry that cross with us. I think that's kind of like the beauty of like, obviously we're not married yet, but we're engaged. No, I'm kidding. Like the beauty of like the two becoming one is like getting to carry that cross together. And getting to follow the Lord and follow like whatever it is that he's asking us to do and getting to do that together, which has also been the beauty of like the Lord putting on your heart to step into outside the camp and to join me in this mission. And while that has not been easy for either one of us, because there's a lot of spiritual warfare on the other side of picking up the cross, but it's a beautiful thing to see what the Lord is doing and uniting our hearts, uniting our visions, and letting us do this together. So you've been a huge blessing to me.
Yeah, and the good thing is you guys get to see every week. You're gonna be doing life with us. And so we're gonna help y'all grow. You're gonna help us grow. Like we're just doing this life. Grow. Watch us grow. Like we're just gonna be doing it together. And so it's fun. It's a fun experience, and I can't wait to see what the Lord does with this. And until next time. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, guys. We love y'all, and we'll be back to our regularly scheduled program as of now. Every week, you'll catch us on Wednesdays, or if I'm not doing my job right, maybe not Wednesday.
You'll definitely get this weekly for sure. So just stay tuned for the next upcoming episodes. We got a lot of things we're going to be sharing, a lot of things coming up. And so, until next time.
We're excited to have you guys come and meet us outside the camp. Bye, guys.
Bye.